We are continuing our series. This is the third week of our series that if you've been following us in person or online, we, during this Holy 50 days, we have this series called He's All I Need. And we're talking about all of the gospel readings that take place during the Holy 50. And the church in her wisdom is telling us and reminding us of everything that Christ is for us. Right? The very second week was, I am the bread of life. Last week, I am the living water. This week, we're going to hear about, I am the light of the world. And we're going to make a connection with what God was for the people in Exodus. And what the people of Exodus got to experience in God in their journey from slavery in Egypt to the promised land in Israel, in Canaan. God was pointing to us what He wants to be for us. What God has longed to be for you, and not to find some other thing to meet your needs, because you're going to end up hungry again. There's a verse in the Bible that says, he who ate of the manna hungered and died, but Christ said, I am the bread of life. He who eats me will never hunger, and he who drinks of my blood will never thirst. And so Christ is saying, I want to meet a need for you that the world could never meet. And then last week we spoke about how He makes our bitterness sweet, and how when the people were leaving the wilderness or crossing the Red Sea, they got to a place in the wilderness where for 3 days they hadn't drunk any water. Their water had run out, and they found wells, they drank of these wells, and they were bitter. It was the wells of Mara, or in Arabic it's Morra, okay? And so they drank of this, and God was able not to give them another well. He had them drink of this bitter well, and He turned the bitterness into sweetness. We talked about how Jesus is the one that can turn our bitterness to sweetness, and how we all will experience at some point in our lives bitterness. But Christ intends that bitterness that you might be experiencing. We talked about somebody who might hear news of a disease. Maybe somebody, God forbid, hears they have cancer. That news to them is bitterness. It's fear. It's scary. It's something that I don't know if I can accept. And then as a person begins to go through it, God turns that bitterness into sweetness, where you talk to some people who recovered will say, those were the most glorious days of my life. You mean when you were on the hospital bed, like in the ICU? Yes. Jesus was able to turn my bitterness to be sweet. Same thing, St. Paul was in prison. We know that St. Paul was taken, he was thrown in prison in his mission, and he was locked in prison, and he's writing the epistle. He says, rejoice in the Lord always, and again I say rejoice. You say, wait, we thought you were in prison. No, I am in prison. But I was able to find joy, sweetness out of the bitterness, because he saw that I could suffer with Christ. To the point where even the apostles in places in the book of Acts, they rejoiced that they could suffer with Christ. But only Jesus can do that. And it's so important that you understand that only Jesus can do that for you. And it's not, I was sitting with a young man recently, and he was saying, Abuna, like I pray my Gbeya, I do my things, I read my Bible. But I said, it's not robotic. It's not like you do this checklist and magically your bitterness is going to turn sweet. It is the drinking of the well of Jesus. It is connecting to the person of Jesus and having Him do that. So as we continue, we're going to reflect on the words of today's gospel in John chapter 12, verses 35 and 36. It says this, then Jesus said to them, this is today's gospel, a little while longer the light is with you. Walk while you have the light, lest darkness overtake you. He who walks in darkness does not know where he is going. While you have the light, believe in the light, that you may become sons of light. These things Jesus spoke and departed and was hidden from them. And then in John 12:46 it says this, I have come as a light into the world, that whoever believes in me should not abide in darkness. You see, the Lord was speaking to the Jews because the Jews were blinded. They were blinded. Jesus was in their midst. God Himself was tabernacled among them, and they could not see it. God himself in the person of Jesus Christ was living there doing miracles. Everything that we see in the Old Testament, Jesus was doing. Again, he was the bread of life. He is the living water. He is today, what we're going to learn about, is the light of the world. Nothing breaks my heart more than somebody coming to me and saying, I don't know how I couldn't see the signs, Abuna. I don't know, like, I couldn't see the signs before I got married. Or I couldn't see the signs, like, God was warning me. And I was completely blind. How many of you have been in a situation where you came out of a situation and you came to the conclusion, you say, I don't know how I was like that. I was totally blind. Isn't that the worst feeling in the world? Isn't that the worst feeling in the world, that somebody could be totally blind? Nothing breaks my heart. Somebody says, Abuna, I don't know how I could have fallen in that trap. You weren't in the light. You weren't walking in the light. I want to be in the light as he is in the light. There's nothing worse than walking in darkness and confusion. There's nothing more painful than realizing I am so lost because I strayed away from the light. And so Jesus was pointing that he is the light, that same light that led the Jews in the book of Exodus as they were going on this journey from slavery in Egypt to the promised land. And we're going to read some beautiful verses. As I say, in every light in life, the best verses in the Bible, we're going to read them today. Okay? But before we do, I want you to be reminded. We talked about in these holy 50 days, we're on a journey. Where are we going? We're going to heaven. The church is transferring us to heaven, a heavenly mind. And the Bible says, if then you have been raised with Christ, set your mind on things above and not on things of the earth. It says, if you've been risen with Christ, then now you need to start living what? A heavenly life. Because the earthly life stinks. Earthly life is terrible. You make money, okay, it's not enough. You get a job, you get fired. You buy a house, it burns down. Like, there's always something, it happens. Actually, somebody recently told me their house caught on fire. Nobody ever thinks that's going to happen to them, but it happens. And so what the Bible is saying is that we are going to another world. We're going on a journey. Have you ever been on a road trip? You say, okay, we're going to go on a road trip. We're driving to Florida. We'll stop off in, South Carolina to go to the bathroom, maybe get something to eat. And then, have you ever been on a road trip where you have this beautiful destination, the resort is waiting for you, and you decide, we're going to stop off in Tennessee. Hey, let's just hang out in Tennessee. You're like, but we have this beautiful resort in Florida waiting for us. We paid for it. It's ready to go. It's got everything. No, we kind of took a detour, and let's go to Tennessee, and let's stop in North Carolina, and let's just go back home. No way. You know your destination. You know that your destination is the most desirable place to be. You're on a journey. And to go on that journey, you need to follow a map. I'll tell you a funny story. This is before GPSs and cell phones. I know young college students out there that there was a time when people didn't have cell phones. This is the Fred Flintstone and me when we used to hang out. Okay, we didn't have cell phones. Sherry's family was moving to Florida from Michigan. So they were driving from Michigan to Florida, driving two different cars. One person missed an exit. And the girls were crying. Each parent had one of the kids in the car crying, I'm never going to see my sister again. I'm never going to see my mom again. There's no cell phones. How do we reach them? We're in the middle of South Carolina. How do we get there? They had a plan of where they were going to meet. If this ever happens, just go back to where it happened and go to the exit and whatever plan they had. But I want you to imagine that they're going on a road trip and one person exits wrong or doesn't make the freeway or whatever, and all of a sudden, that's it. I lost my husband forever. I know. Some of you are going to say, honey, let's go take a road trip. That's next week. That sounds like a great plan, Abuna. But that's what a lot of us are doing, wandering around in circles, not following the light. Imagine thinking, for the Israelites, as they're going through this journey, that the wilderness, the desert of Egypt, was the end. Imagine if they left Egypt and they crossed the Red Sea and they're hanging around in Sinai, and this was the end destination. That would be terrible. But they were going to a promised land. So I need all of us to direct our minds and ask yourself first, are you going to the promised land? Be honest. Take a step back and think for a second. Am I like on a detour? Did I get off the exit and I don't know where I'm going? Am I like lost in this world and I don't realize that I have a plan and that I'm supposed to be getting somewhere and I have a final destination? And am I following the path? Let's listen to this journey that they took in the desert, in the wilderness of Egypt. In Exodus 13, after they had, the angel of death had killed all the firstborn of the Egyptians, they escaped, they had their Passover meal. Here's Exodus 13. Then it came to pass when Pharaoh had let them go, that God did not lead them by the way of the Philistines, although that was near. For God said, lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. Lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and return to Egypt. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea, and the children of Israel went up in orderly ranks out of the land of Egypt. You see, when God was leading the people of Israel, He didn't give them the shortcut. How many of you are complaining to God about the shortcut that God is not giving you? Come on, God, just open that door and it's a shortcut and we'll be there in just a second. How many of you are complaining that God is not opening up the shortcut? God knows why He's closing those doors. God, you know what? What could have been an 11-day journey took them 40 years. It was an 11-day walk. It took them 40 years. Going around, going the long way. He says, I don't want to lead them by the way of the land of the Philistines, although that was near. So God intentionally is not taking you by the land that is near, by the way that is easy, by the way that is a shortcut. He doesn't do that because He knows. Lest perhaps the people change their minds when they see war and returns to Egypt. You see, God doesn't want you to go back to slavery. And so God, if He's going to take you the long route, you're saying, God, really? Is there no one else? Somebody told me recently, is there no one else in the world like all of your spiritual discipline is only for me in the world? Like I'm experiencing everything? But God doesn't want you to take the shortcut. Not because He wants your life to be hard. Because He knows if you go back to Egypt, Pharaoh is not going to have mercy on you. Pharaoh is going to make you a slave forever. Ask yourself this morning, if God is taking you on the long route, is it because He doesn't want you to go back to be a slave? A slave to your insecurities, a slave to your doubts, a slave to your problems, your sins, your negativity. So God's saying, I got to heal this. So we're going to go the long route. We're going to go the long route because I need to get the Egypt out of you. I need to get the Egypt out of you. These people were slaves and all they knew was Egypt. And so it was going to take time. I can't have you going to the promised land as slaves. It doesn't look right. I can't have slaves living in the promised land. It doesn't work that way. You have to stop being slaves. So I'm going to get the Egypt out of your heart. Because Egypt was in their heart. And we're going to see later, but how much the people were complaining. Were there no graves in Egypt that you brought us to this land? And they say, we remember that we used to sit, we read it last week, we used to sit by the pots of meat and we'd smell them and we had cucumbers and you were slaves. Did you forget? Did you forget you were slaves? You didn't eat the pots of meat, you sat by them, okay? Like you got to guard them for the Egyptians to be able to eat them, okay? But we forget. Let's read. Exodus 13, 20 to 22. It says, so they took their journey from Succoth and camped in Etham at the edge of the wilderness. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to lead the way, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. So as to go by day and night, He did not take away the pillar of cloud by day or the pillar of fire by night from before the people. Okay, they're in the middle of a desert. They're in the middle of a desert, and they're walking around. If I turn off the lights in this room for 5 minutes, people start screaming. Nice carpet, it's TV, like it's nice. People start screaming. Imagine you're in the desert. There's animals, and there's snakes, and it could be cold, or it could be hot, or it could be... We don't know what could be out there. And all of a sudden, how are we going to get through this desert? Like, we don't have light. We're 2 million people. 2 million people in the desert, and there's no light. That is a big deal. But God says, don't you think that if I'm going to lead you in this way, I'm going to provide the light? What kind of light? So all of a sudden you see, Alexa, turn on the... No. Pillar of fire from the ground to the heavens. From the ground to... Enough light for 2 million people. I don't know how bright that was, but if 2 million people were standing... If you guys ever see, like, the marches in D.C. or the protests, and like in Egypt, you see like millions and millions of people in the street. You're like, okay, if we were to light up this, how big would that fire have to be? You see, when God provides light, it's so you can see everything. It's so that you know exactly where you're going. There's no confusion in your life. There's no doubt what God is doing because the light is making us clear, making it clear for us. I want you to understand something about the light and how it looked. What do you guys think? You have the cloud by day and the pillar of fire by night. One thing or two things? Was it one thing or was it two different things? Huh? Somebody said two? What do you think? One or two? Two. It seems like two, but it was one. It was actually a pillar of fire wrapped with a cloud. So I want you to imagine, it was a pillar of fire wrapped with a cloud. At night, the fire was so bright that it lit up, that it was enough even though it was wrapped with a cloud. Why? What do you think it's pointing to? What is it pointing to when you have fire wrapped with a cloud? The cloud is not very exciting. It's a cloud, right? There's nothing magical about a cloud. The fire is magical, so it's surrounded by a cloud. Why? What is it pointing to? No, more than St. Mary. That's the burning bush, yes. But now, more than St. Mary. So who's more than St. Mary? Which person of the Trinity? The Lord Jesus Christ. He came with a veil of a cloud. They saw him as a normal man, but inside was what? Fire. And so what Jesus is saying, when he says, I am the light of the world, he's saying, do you remember everything that light was for the people of Israel? Do you remember for them, we're scared, there's animals, there's noises, whatever, and all of a sudden, fire, everything's like beautiful. God's saying, I am that. It's pointing to his humanity, right? His divinity was clothed with his humanity. And so you see Jesus, the people thought he was just a normal man, he's a nice man, but inside was what? Fire. It's pointing, and we call it a theophany, just like we say on the Feast of Epiphany. We call it like a theophany. It's an appearance of God. This is an appearance of God. But I have a question. Is it possible that light, that fire, is hidden by a cloud in your life? That there is a fire, a really powerful fire, so bright and so powerful and so hot and so everything, and it's covered with a cloud. Do you think God could possibly be working in your life and it just looks like a cloud, but inside is fire? Inside is his divinity. Inside is the power of God. Maybe your sickness is clothed in a cloud, but it's fire. It's God leading you somewhere. A trial, some misfortune, it's just a cloud. But in that cloud is God working. If you see a cloud, if all of a sudden there was a big cloud, you say, oh, it's going to be raining today. No big deal. Like you're not shocked by the cloud. Okay, it's not. But if the fire in the cloud is what's moving the cloud, God is moving in your life through the clouds. There are things that just look like a cloud. It's a sickness, it's a trial, you lost your job, some misfortune, something happened, something less desirable, it's just a cloud. But I promise you, what's moving that cloud you have to know, is fire. Do you believe that or not? Not up here. Do you believe it in here? Everybody's going to say, amen, Abuna, we believe you. And then you come sit with me in the office, you're like, I don't know where God is. He's in the cloud. He's in the thing. He's in the cloud. He's there. He knows. He knows that it's wrapped in a cloud, and he knows because if you saw the fire, you would freak out. So he closes it with a cloud. He's hiding in it. He knows what he's doing to make sure that you don't turn off the path of heaven. So you lost your job, you didn't get this prize or raise or reward or whatever it is, whatever God didn't give you, it's a cloud, right? It looks like it's about to be rainy and gloomy. But inside that, God is saying, it's a fire. Because why am I leading you this way? Why am I leading you through sickness or through misfortune or through a trial? Because I don't want you to ever end up being a slave to Pharaoh again. So I'm getting the Egypt out of you. And I'm leading you this way. And trust me, if you get to war, because he says, I'm leading them this way because if they see war, they're going to turn back and go become slaves. If there's a little bit of struggle, they're not going to be able to deal with it. And so let me take them the long route. The long route is maybe some of these trials that are a fire wrapped in a cloud. Let's move on. Let's move on. You have to know that God knows best. I found this quote. It says, I thank God for protecting me from what I thought I wanted and blessed me with what I didn't know I needed. Most of us, anybody who deals with children, kids never know what they need. Like, I don't know how many times you tell them, you just have to keep on protecting them from the box of chocolates. Like, they just, like, no matter how many times you tell them, no matter how many trips to the dentist, how many drills in their teeth, I want chocolate. And so, they don't know what they need. And so, we have to work around them, and we have to kind of lead them around. One day, they'll appreciate, wow, I didn't know that what I thought I wanted, maybe is something that wasn't for me. All right, let's read. Exodus 14, 19 to 20. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them. So they're going. They were being led by the pillar of light, by the pillar of fire. Okay? It moved and went behind them. And the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. Thus it was a cloud and darkness to the one, and it gave light by night to the other, so that the one did not come near and the other all that night. So I want you to imagine, here we are, we're scaredy cat Israelites. We saw Pharaoh, their chariots, their horsemen, their armies, they are powerful. We're wearing like our galabeyas, running through the desert. We don't know what we're doing. And all of a sudden they hear the horses, and they hear the chariots, and they're coming. And it's getting louder, and they're screaming, and they want to kill us. And all of a sudden, they go and they realized they're at a dead end. What's in front of them? The Red Sea. That's it. That's it. Pharaoh's going to come and he's going to get me. And all of a sudden, if you read before that, when God is instructing Moses, he says, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. Today, or some other time, your Moses, Jesus, is telling you, stand still and see the salvation of the Lord. That light has a function. God is not going to create this amazing pillar and this huge thing and say, oh, sorry, I didn't calculate. I forgot there was a Red Sea. Good luck, guys. What does he do? Comes here and sets a boundary between Pharaoh and the people of Israel. Two things why this happened. God knew he wanted the Israelites to realize how powerful the Egyptians are. Like you hear those horses and you hear the screaming and the running and the stomping, like you're terrified. He wanted them to feel that. So that when God gives them that strike, there's nobody that can beat their God. Sometimes God is leading you in a way. This light led them to a dead end. It led them to a dead end so that he could say, I'm telling you, just watch what we're going to do. And so the fire came in between, separates us from our enemies. Separates us from our enemies. What do we say in Tasbih? The Lord is a man of war. My best verse in all of Tasbih. Right? We say, the Lord is a man of war. Chariots, and his horsemen he has cast into the sea. The Lord is a man of war. God is not weak. God is not going to let your enemy come and get you. But you have to follow the light. Number one, because he's leading you here, he wants to show you his power. He's leading you here to create maybe that little bit of fear to show you, I'm way more powerful than Pharaoh. Not only did the light, harakah, that was cool, right? Put a big boundary and now all the Egyptians, they can't come near the Israelites. That's amazing. And then God says, Moses, stick your what? Raise up your staff and stick it in that Red Sea. And everyone, I have an order for you tonight. Go watch Prince of Egypt on Netflix. It's on Netflix or wherever. Go watch Prince of Egypt. Have you ever seen Prince of Egypt? There can be miracles. It's the best ever. And all of a sudden, the Red Sea opens up and the people are walking on dry ground. Why am I saying this? God's light is purposeful. God is leading you in this way, number one, because he knows what's best. Number two, he uses the light to protect us from our enemies. He uses the light to protect us from our enemies. He knows when you're following God's commandments, when you're following his word, you don't know why God is telling you to go here, but he knows why he's telling you to go here. He's trying to protect you from enemies that you can't see. There are enemies in your spiritual life that you cannot see, but God can see them because he is what? He is light. And because he is light, he is leading you in a certain way, and you're saying, why this way? Why the long? He wants to separate you from the enemies, and so he knows exactly what he's trying to do. Pharaoh, who represents the devil and sin in the world, he separates us from that. This firm separator. Are you allowing the light of his commandments to separate you from your enemies? See, when God gives commandments, I think some people think that God is just giving rules because he likes rules. Just like my kids think I'm giving rules just because I want to be in control, and like it's just a rule just to say, kid, hey kiddo khalas. I used to hate when my parents would tell me, hey kiddo khalas. There's got to be a reason. Don't tell me kiddo khalas. Like there's a reason why you're telling me this rule. God doesn't say, hey kiddo khalas. God knows exactly. These commandments are going to keep you, okay? They're going to keep you in the straightest path. They're going to keep you in the right path. Because if you go a little bit this way, that's why the commandments say, okay, don't go here, because it's going to destroy everything else. Thou shalt not is not because God is just trying to control you, because God has a control problem. No. God is telling you, thou shalt not, you shall not do these things, because there's bad guys over here. And the bad guys are not going to just destroy you, they're going to destroy you and your wife and your children and your parents and everything else. There's bad guys, go straight. You shall not go there. La nahagarb. Right? Don't we all do that? I'm going to try it. I'm going to go this way. Good luck. And what do? We come to confession. I don't know why. I don't read the Bible. You don't read. Yani, imagine the big light is going. Like, right? Let's go. The light is going this way. That's what his commands are. Be in his word, because light is there to direct. It is to direct. It's not there for us to have cool discussions with smiley faces in our. It's there to direct our steps through obedience to his commandments. Listen to this passage. I'm going to ask you what sticks out about this passage, and then we'll continue. Numbers 9:15-23. It says this. So it was always. Most important word, always. The cloud covered it by day, the tabernacle, and the appearance of fire by night. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, after that the children of Israel would journey, and in the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. At the command of the Lord, the children of Israel would journey, and at the command of the Lord, they would camp. As long as the cloud stayed above the tabernacle, they remained encamped. Even when the cloud continued long, many days above the tabernacle, the children of Israel kept the charge of the Lord and did not journey. So it was, when the cloud was above the tabernacle a few days, according to the command of the Lord, they would remain encamped. And according to the command of the Lord, they would journey. What do you see in that passage? Huh? Command of the Lord. What else? The person that's writing this is Moses, okay? He's OCD, actually. If you study personality types, Moses, that's why the tabernacle has so many details that nobody cares about, right? How many rings and what the color of the rings were, and Moses likes things. And so why is he stressing so much here? Look at how many times he says, they would journey or be encamped, or they would journey or be encamped. If the pillar moved, they moved. If the pillar stopped, they stopped. It says even could be for a year, could continue long. They could be years in one spot. Man, we're sick of it. They knew. Read the passage. It's the most annoying passage in the Bible. I usually show you guys the best verses. This is the most annoying passage in the whole Bible. Okay? It just keeps on repeating over and over again. Why? Moses is trying to say something. If the fire moves, you move. If the fire doesn't move, what? We don't move. You know, like when you go to a field trip with the kids. If the teacher raises his hand, what does that mean? If the teacher, the whole hand thing is really annoying. Moses is being so clear. How many of you are making decisions? And you're going and you're coming and you're leaving the fire and you're coming with the fire and you're leaving the cloud and coming. You get mad. Don't move. If the fire doesn't tell you to move, don't move. Why? Because there's bad guys over there. The bad guys are going to leave in about 5 days, so we're going to stay another 5 days. God knows. Do not leave. Sometimes, we know that, our wives can be anxious. They're anxious, right? They love their children so much, they get anxious. And so they're like, but what about the kids? And I don't know if Sherry thinks either, and I'm andish them or I have a lot of faith. She probably thinks it's the first one, okay? Because she's like, but what about? I'm like, we'll figure it out. What do you mean we'll figure it out? Like, it's tomorrow. We'll figure it out. Did God tell us to move? No. But we have to make a decision. Did God tell you where to go? Did the light shine and say, go here? We're not going. But God has to hurry up. Yani God doesn't know. Our kids هيبقوا في الشارع يعني كده. He doesn't know. How many husbands, how many of you have had this conversation every day of your life, okay? God doesn't know. And God isn't going to figure this out. Did God open up a door for us 6 months ago? No. Yeah, but why are we regretting that we didn't do? God didn't tell us to move yet. Maybe it's going to be the last minute. Maybe God wants to show us His power. Maybe we are stuck at the Red Sea. Maybe God knows why He hasn't moved the pillar of fire. Whenever the cloud was taken up from above the tabernacle, the children of Israel would journey. And in the place where the cloud settled, there the children of Israel would pitch their tents. All of our anxiety out there, you're not following the light. There is a light leading you. Do not think that God doesn't know. You're saying, but God should know that it should be now. God knows. God wants us to miss something. He doesn't want us to make the wrong choice, so He closes the doors and now we can't move. And He wants us to miss something. He wants to make something clear to us. He wants us to go, and we're saying, but it's so nice here. God is saying, go. I'm telling you, there's blessing. I'll give you an example. When I was in mortgage consulting before I was ordained. It was a time when there was a big boom. So things were very good and very nice. And we decided we felt God was leading us to go to Kenya. And we said goodbye to our bosses, and we said to send emails and whatever. We left our jobs. And our coworkers were like, are you crazy? This is the best time in the mortgage industry. This was in 2008 when it was like at its highest. We left in March. There was I didn't know, nobody knew. There was a crash, a mortgage crisis crash in May. I was getting emails from my coworkers. How did you know? How did you know? I'm like, I didn't know. I was following the light. The light said, go to Kenya, but money's coming in from everywhere. The light said, go to Kenya, we're going to Kenya. And then everything tanked, everything. Like they were all like fired and whatever. And we followed the light. If you follow the light, but it doesn't make sense, who would leave now? God would leave now. Follow the light. He's the easiest person to trust. I didn't read you the rest of the verse. Look at how many more times. So it was, when the cloud remained only from evening until morning. When the cloud was taken up in the morning, then they would journey. Whether by day or by night, whenever the cloud was taken up, they would journey. Whether it was 2 days, a month, or a year, that cloud remained above the tabernacle. The children of Israel would remain encamped and not journey. But when it was taken up, they would journey. At the command of the Lord, they remained encamped, and at the command of the Lord, they journeyed. They kept the charge of the Lord at the command of the Lord by the hand of Moses. Worst passage in the whole Bible, but the most important passage in the whole Bible. Most important. Follow the light. You say, okay, but how? It's not a formula. Get on your knees, close the door, look up and say, Lord, speak to me. He'll speak to you through circumstances. He'll speak to you very clearly through His Word. He'll speak to you through the church. He will speak to you, but you have to look for the light. Don't just go off on your own. You know what I love? It says they pitched their tents. They were living a tent life. You see, a tent is easy. A tent, God says go, you fold up the tent and we go. God says stays, you put the tent and we stay. I remember when we used to go do house building projects when I lived in California, in Mexico. Us Egyptian youth, we would take tents. We'd plant the tents. We'd go to like Nishram Shea, and what would happen to our tents? In the wind. Just like all of our tents would always be like, every year it would happen. Our tents would go flying in the wind, and we had to go put them back again. Tents are easy. They just pick up and they go down. Very easy. Except to live a tent life. Today you are in a tent here. Tomorrow you are in a tent wherever God says you're going. But I don't know. God knows. Don't move without the presence of the Lord in your life. David says in Psalm 25:4, show me your ways, O Lord. Teach me your paths. Not teach me where to go. Teach me the types of paths that you have. Help me to understand your paths. I remember before I met His Holiness, Abu Bishoy had brought me to His Holiness Pope Shenouda III for my ordination. I'll never forget, he quoted this verse, and it's always been ringing in my ears. Jeremiah 10:23, O Lord, I know the way of man is not in himself. It is not in man who walks to direct his own steps. You don't direct your own steps. God directs your steps. Follow the light. Walk in the light, and there shall be no darkness at all. No confusion. No doubts. And if you have doubts, what's the problem? You're not in the light. It's not a God problem. It's a you problem. I'm not in the light. I'm the one that needs to get in the light. If you're outside the light, and everything, we're arguing, we can't agree, you're out of the light. You forgot Jesus Khalis. And we're trying to come up with strategies of how to overcome our life. It doesn't work that way. It doesn't work that way. Walk in the light. In Him is no darkness at all. Glory be to God forever.